Welcome to Bird Control Group, the podcast on bird behaviors. We will dive deeper into birds and their behaviors. Although birds are beautiful and sometimes breathtaking, they can be a real nuisance in a variety of cases, sometimes even a danger. We will try to figure out how we can control our environment and coexist with birds without harming them, and maybe, along the way, we will even manage to protect our winged friends.
My name is LJ Greene, and I work at the Bird Control Group as their global marketing lead in their own capacity. And it's been a fabulous time working here, and especially because we welcome an old friend who's also in a new company that he started himself as a distributor of Bird Control Group in the UK and Ireland. And that is Sean Byrne. Spelled you told me it was
Irish way. It's the Irish way.
With the the Gabriel. Okay. With Sean Byrne. And he and he's been doing this much longer than I have, which is quite exciting, because how many years? Would you give me an introduction of how long you've been working with bird control lasers as well as this company?
Okay, so thank you, LJ. So I started integrated bird management as of January 2025, like I say, to become the distributor in the UK and Ireland. However, I've probably been involved with lasers since 2016, 2017. So I did work as a previous role for the previous distributor, which was Pesfix in the UK. And since then, so I worked there for 3 or 4 years, and then went and worked at EWS, which I still do to this day, but always had a keen interest in laser deterrence. So always had a good, like I say, working friendship with Bird Control Group, which is.
How did you discover lasers, though? Was that a kind of? Was that a surprise of the technology?
The very first time I came across lasers actually wasn't anything to do with even the previous distributor. So I was working at Rentokil, and I still remember to this day. So there was a large distribution center roof that they were kind of teetering on the edge of wanting to net their roof, and it was a huge site, and it was probably going to be a cost of, I don't know, about £400,000 for netting this roof, and I was 90% sure we were going to get it. And then at the 11th hour, Bird Control Group came in with one of the other partners that install lasers that we still work with, and they installed 3 or 4 laser systems on the roof, which just quashed any chance of getting the netting system. And I'll be honest, even back then I thought, them lasers, it's going to be a gimmick. They're going to fail and they'll still need the net. And actually what was a site where they had 2,000 night roosting gulls, within 7 days of the lasers being installed, never returned to that roof. And to this day, that's 2016 now, to this day, they've never returned. So, that's where my
That's the first time you ever saw it, huh?
Pardon? Yeah, that was the first time I saw it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why I went with the previous distributor of lasers was I wanted to see what these lasers were all about and be a part of it. And so.
What are your favorite aspects? Like when you're taking a look at an installation, I'm sure you're doing a wide range of places where people don't want birds, or the birds are getting in the way. Name a few kinds of places and some of your favorite, like when someone calls you in to solve their bird problem. Give us an adventure you've had in the field.
So where we work is everything from distribution centers like Audi and Amazon. So just big buildings. Then we have other interesting ones like Essex and Suffolk Water, where they have water treatment bays and birds just sitting on the water. We've also got nuclear power stations that we work with. And yes, I think what you say is the most interesting thing. Well, one thing that I still enjoy is when I say to a customer, have you considered laser bird deterrence? And they look at me like, lasers? Like, no way. That's like probably how I used to think of lasers. And like, that's a gimmick. That's never going to work. That's just a made up thing. And then you kind of can show them with the handheld laser very quickly, a demonstration. And then seeing a customer's face when actually you've helped solve a bird problem with relatively, it's an effective solution, but it's quite a straightforward one. Definitely when you compare it against things like nets that could be taking weeks or months to install, lasers can be such a quick installation. with really, really quick results.
Do
So
they
I
assume
guess,
that you're hurting the birds when you tell them that you can solve the problem with the laser, or what are some of, or do they think it's a
so
gimmick, or yeah?
there are some customers still that will ask, oh, but it doesn't harm the birds, does it? And obviously then we can explain that no, it's just visible light and the birds just fly away from what they perceive to be a physical object. However, there are others that are hoping for Star Wars-like events and just plumes of feathers mid-flight. But yeah, obviously we have to bring them back from that point. But yeah, absolutely. It's most customers now don't want to harm wildlife where possible. So just telling them that we're going to push them and drive them away from your roof or your property to be elsewhere, that's a big
So
tick.
give me an example of a place where someone wanted you to solve. Yeah, they wanted to make sure that birds weren't nesting or roosting, and you could take a look to where you were going to install it. Have you been in some odd locations?
We've been in some random locations.
Power plant. That's no fun.
Yeah, the nuclear power plant is right above their reactor. So that's on the rooftop. So that's obviously not, wondering maybe you're going to turn into a superhero at the end of the visit, but it doesn't happen. That's one quite interesting. We've been on various ports, so seaports, and where you've got lots and lots of different buildings, containers, gantries. We also work. I mean, one of the most interesting, probably not interesting to be at necessarily, but one of the most interesting industrial estates that we've worked at, working alongside one of our trusted and improved installers, Scottish Pest Control. Between myself and him over the last few years, we had 3 sites. So one was a shoe distribution center in Bathgate, one was an Amazon distribution center, and one was an Audi distribution center. And between us and Scottish Pest Control, we installed 3 lasers at shoe to begin with. And they had probably close to 100 nesting birds to begin with. And literally across the road was an Audi distribution center who saw what we were doing with lasers at shoe, got in touch with Scottish Pest Control and said, what's going on here? So I went with Scottish Pest Control. They were building a new freezer building, so they installed lasers on that. Wow. Funnily enough, they had a massive roof net on their main building that had collapsed in winds for various reasons, and they didn't want to go down with installing another net at huge expense. So they then installed 4 lasers on their main distribution center roof. But in the meantime, for a relationship that I have with the facilities managers of Amazon, they also got in touch. And so we started installing lasers on their building, which is also the 3rd building on this industrial estate. And so across this site, there was probably 300 pairs of nesting seagulls. And within 1 year of these 3 sites all being set up, they now have 0. So that's probably the most interesting site. And so you'll see the Audi distribution center. There's already a case study created for that. So the other 2 buildings across the way as well. So yeah, that's a whole industrial estate solved of nesting gulls using laser deterrents.
Where do the gulls go? Like if they're going to move from there, they just find a place that's they just go to an alternative location that doesn't have lasers. That's
right. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to follow them. Otherwise,
didn't ship them.
Yeah, we need to chip one and see where he's landing now.
That's a good question. I didn't think about this, but if you're going to be installing lasers on the roof of it, like an industrial estate kind of area, do you have to inform the people around them so that they feel safe?
In terms of have to, no, but any business that we do, obviously we'll go and speak to the next door neighbors. Normally, if you've got one building with a problem, likelihood is the other neighboring buildings have it anyway, so it makes sense to go and drop your card in. And what I think works quite well is going in and telling these neighboring sites, you may see us installing some lasers. You may wonder what that is. That's us. We're deterring the birds. If you have a problem, we'll happily help you too. And that's probably what happened at Bathgate in Scotland.
Okay. Does the client have to have a license, or only the installer, or is there any kind of licensing program in the UK that shows that you're allowed to work with this Class 3D laser?
So there's not a licensing for the Class 3. Sorry, there's training that we have to have. So anyone that wants to install the AVIX Autonomics have to undergo the Bird Control Group's online training, which we provide as part of the sale. So we only sell them to approved installers or where we're maintaining the equipment after installation. In terms of using them, there isn't any permits or any planning application that needs to go in because it's not considered a permanent structure. It's always aiming down onto a projection zone, so we're not worried about aircraft. They're highly technical equipment, so you don't have to worry about it doing something you don't program into it. So having trained, competent people programming the patterns that it's going to project, it's only going to protect the projection zone.
And do you do the programming of the patterns, or does the customer do that when you're?
Ordinarily, we always prefer to be either us or our approved installers to be the people that program the patterns into it and then are responsible for maintaining it. It's not to say that we couldn't train an end client how to program a laser. We could. However, we also have to couple our knowledge of bird behavior and biology to make sure that they get the best results. So for us, having pest controllers and bird controllers in charge of the equipment gets the best results.
So, but prior to then working with the lasers, how did you get into bird just generally speaking, removing birds as pests, as you could say, from the commercial and farm locations? Yeah.
Okay, so in 2008, so in 2008, in the height of the credit crunch, as they called it.
Oh yeah, that one.
I was made redundant from a role selling photocopiers. So always living life in the fast lane. So I was made redundant because one of the offices got mothballed at the last minute. And I just moved from one town to another for this role. And so I needed to find a job quickly. And the first job that I could start at that time was Rentokil. So I got into pest control and bird control as a salesperson, which I did for a few years working in around the Oxfordshire region. And after 3 years, I went for a role that quite a pretentious title, but it was specialist services consultant, which was primarily bird control, fumigation, and heat. So more complex requirements. And so it was more like a sales management or sales support role for 27 different salespeople.
Okay.
And so then that role was to support them in providing solutions to customers. That was everything from netting, spikes, electrical bird deterrent systems, and so on. And so, and that's where I found kind of more of a passion for bird control in general. And then, like I say, did that role from 2008 to 2016 before joining the other distributor. Yeah, so.
Okay. But then did you get, so obviously if you're working with Rentokil, you're doing other kinds of pests as well. So you became the pest.
The first 3, so for the first 3 years, it was every type of pest you could imagine. And then so from 2011 to 2016, when I was the specialist services consultant, it was primarily bird control. So it was a region of Rentokil that, I don't know, it was, when I joined, it was doing maybe £1 million a year in bird control. It became £2 million pound a year by the time I left. But that was an enjoyable, and I think bird control for me, if you took that as a subsector of pest control, is the most interesting part. It's the most, the biggest number of variables. Every site's different. Every site needs a solution for that specific site. So,
around the UK in your region and Ireland also, what species of birds are considered to be the most irritating for humans in different?
So most people, I guess, would say the feral pigeon, and also known as the flying rat by some.
Yeah,
that would be definitely one that's. Yeah, some people like rats. That's okay. But pigeons definitely is kind of the biggest one for the kind of urban areas. The ones that cause the biggest problems, I would argue, would be different variants of gulls. So whether you're talking about lesser black-backed, greater black-backed, or herring gulls, they tend to be the ones that cause the most costly damage or the most costly issues, if you like. So blocked gullies, blocked drains, fouling over solar panels, and so on. But we do come across others like starlings, sparrows, crows, and corvids. We're starting to see more inquiries around floating solar arrays as well. So you're talking then about cormorants and so on. But the biggest species that are a pest in the UK would definitely be gulls and pigeons.
Okay, and so cormorants would be more at aquaculture, or?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And do you have a lot of aquaculture now in?
Not massively in the UK so far, but we're starting to talk to a number of fish farmers up in Scotland. And we're also starting to see more inquiries now for floating solar arrays. So where they've got a lake or a reservoir, they have a floating solar array, which is great because it uses disused space, if you like.
Right.
However, that provides then a night and day roosting area for different species of birds, which then leads to lots of fouling on the solar panels, and then that reduces the yield that those solar panels generate. So
they're
we're starting to
difficult
see more.
I guess they would be difficult to clean if they're floating arrays. Is that the
Yeah,
main
you
issue?
typically need a boat out onto the floating array. You then need people. Okay, there's a health and safety element to it, but then they need to actually get
Yeah.
out and clean the solar array. It's not normally easy to do. So the floating solar arrays, the idea behind them is that they are low maintenance installations. You know, maybe once or twice a year, people are going to them. If they're covered in covered in fouling, it means there's a number of more visits needed. And typically those installations are away from most commercial zones. So there's a lot of traveling costs for the teams that install and maintain them.
Okay, so that's a new area. So there's a huge variety of places that you would install, but not to farms, according to what I understand. There's some rules that
Less
you
so.
said that
Yeah, less so, unfortunately, in the UK. So although the lasers come from the agricultural market, and the UK has a massive agricultural sector, we have something in the UK known as the right to roam, so that a lot of farmers' fields will have walkways and public right-of-ways through them. And being that the lasers are Class 3B device,
right.
you have to make sure that it's safe for people's eyesight. So it's a shame, but we are now seeing more and more inquiries for farming. It's just ways that they can set up protocols to make sure that we're only projecting over what you'd call a controlled environment. So that's our biggest challenge in
Poultry
farming.
farms, then I would imagine if they're like egg farms, they're fairly enclosed. Is that a possibility?
So they're enclosed, and in the UK there was a company called Orchard Eggs. There's a good case study, I believe, on Bird Control Group's website for them. They got great results for using lasers to deter wild birds to try and restrict and prevent the spread of bird flu, which worked really, really well. So this is another growing area that we're now starting to promote into.
Is the bird flu that we see in the States, is that crossing over into the UK? Have you found cases of the? It is,
So
okay.
There's been a lot of news, a lot of information about bird flu in Scotland, particularly, where they've had a number of cases.
Okay. So that's a trending topic. It's all, you hear a lot of it in the US. Okay.
Yep.
And so that would be the agriculture kind of biosecurity thing that you're dealing with in.
Yeah.
Okay. But as far as commercial, do you do any recreational? Are there places of recreational, like, I don't know. We had a case study that we just posted on our web of lawn bowling in Australia.
So we've had some inquiries about lawn bowling. We've provided a proposal, for a lawn bowls association in London.
I had to look it up, and I'm like, that's just bocce ball, right?
Yeah, that's it.
We use the Italian name in America, I think.
Yeah, so we've had that. The other ones we've had is golf courses. So we've just done a deal with some handheld lasers for some golf courses in the UK. And we're also currently at an early stage, but we're hopeful that we'll get an order soon from the FA, so the Football Association of England, at their training facility, where they have geese feeding on the grass seed when it's the end of season. So we're just looking to try and protect them now.
To protect the pitch. Okay, well, what about the stadium? What I think out of the US, we had found that there was, I think you call it bird foul, right? What did you call it?
Bird fouling, yeah.
We call it bird
fouling,
foul.
Yeah. Okay, bird droppings, yeah, it's still the same thing. Yeah.
But in sports stadiums, oftentimes in the States, like they nest kind of in these overhang areas, and so then they, not just for that they don't nest, but also that you have to clean the seats before every match or every game. Do you have that issue in the UK as well?
Yeah, and again, one of our installation partners, NBC, I don't know if they're still, they've been doing some work at Twickenham, which is the National Rugby Stadium, where they had pigeons sitting underneath the gantries, and exactly what you said, fouling or droppings, depending on what you prefer, landing on the seats below. So they use lasers there in combination with falconry to try and deter pigeons from the stadium. We've also looked at others, such as Leicester City Football Stadium. They started using some handheld lasers a while back to stop the pigeons as well. So,
any of the places where Ted Lasso? Just kidding. Ted Lasso's not real. I just like to show. So then that being said, when you're approaching people, are you just telling are they coming to you because they've heard about lasers through their network? Or is it always something you feel like you have to introduce to them for the first time, a solution they haven't heard before?
More recently, we see now that actually people are having it specified. So we're also working in construction for new build sites where they are now having lasers specified as part of the overall project, which is new, relatively new. I guess lasers have been around since 2014. So we're now 10 years in. I think it's now more of a known solution. Sorry, somewhat more known, but it's definitely still an innovative solution versus netting and spikes, things that people know. So often we're talking to customers where they have a bird issue, and very rarely do they care particularly what we offer, but then what they want is an absolute solution. So yeah, nets they understand is a physical barrier. Often we're telling customers, look, this is how a laser works. It's working to mimic the bird's natural flight or fight, and they can't fight against a laser system. So yeah, they have to fly away from it. And customers like that. It's a silent solution. It's a long-term solution, and versus nets, it's more humane and probably less costly on most instances. So,
and then you have recently then gone. I mean, since the beginning of the year, you launched your own company. That's quite interesting. What were you? What motivated you to go in? I guess you never see an end to the need to fight birds and places where people want birds. So you put all your eggs in a basket of bird control.
All my eggs in one basket. Okay.
Okay, sorry, it was a horrible pun. Sorry.
That was a good pun.
I think it was like an Eastery pun, but you're right.
Yeah, it's an Easter pun. There we go. So bird control, I don't think is ever going to get smaller in the UK. I think it's going to get bigger and bigger because licensing conditions have become harder to get. People are more environmentally conscious, which is a good thing. But what it does mean is that humans are in conflict with birds more often. So it's definitely a growing industry. What made me set up on my own? It was, Bird Control Group, you guys did come to me and say, Sean, we're thinking about making a change. So that helped me make that decision. But I think so far the UK's we've barely scratched the surface with how lasers can help various industry sectors. So for me, I see it as a market and an industry that can grow massively from where it is now. And not to blow my own trumpet, but I think I've probably installed more of these lasers than anyone else in the UK. So I know they work. I know they can offer a benefit to a lot of customers. So yeah, my plan is to grow that further.
Okay. Now give me an anecdote, or not an anecdote, but give me a story about a customer that might have been or an installation where they were super skeptical. I mean, you were skeptical when you first started. You thought it was a gimmick. Have you had to have that same kind of stodgy attitude towards this is a sustainable bird control solution, and here we come with our
I think everyone, I'd say not every customer, but there's a large percentage of customers that do think, okay, we're not sure about this laser. But it doesn't take very long to point them towards videos online, which Bird Control Group have a lot of, which does kind of suggest it already worked. But most customers then still say, yeah, but that was probably the one-off site that it worked perfectly. So often, if you can turn up and do a really good demonstration using a handheld laser even on their own site, they see within seconds, okay, the birds really do not like this laser. So it's really easy to do a good demonstration. So by the point that we've got a customer to agree to an installation, that normally the skepticism is already gone and dissipated by that. So normally it's more a case of they've made the decision and then they're looking optimistically that it's going to work well. And then most of the time, I would say we typically see a reduction in bird numbers almost instantly of sort of 60, 70% straight away. And oftentimes closer to 100%. So I'd say after installation, we have very little skepticism come back from our customers.
Okay, and that's interesting. And does it vary from like high summer to winter? Do you have, because it's darker, of course, in the winter, and high summer, you might have other sources of light. Is there any difference in how the birds perceive the lasers in the summer?
So the biggest challenge for the lasers is to work against natural sunlight. But the effective range of the bird deterrent lasers is still 250 to 300 meters on bright sunny conditions, which luckily we don't, well, I say luckily, but we don't have too many of them in the UK. So
It's a perfect environment.
yeah, very variable. If you don't like our weather, wait 5 minutes, it will change. However, if you, there is always going to be a drop off. So I guess nesting goals that we use the lasers against, they have a real strong habitual need to be on a site. So if you try and install lasers in the middle of summer when they're nesting on site, then that's when we're going to get the lower results. However, normally we work with our customers to come up with solutions that aim to deter the birds before they arrive. So ideally, we work with our customers to install the lasers at the right time so they get the best results. And that reduction then works year on year. So yeah, if we install them right now, let's say, we may see a 60 to 70% drop, but that's year on year that continues to get better. So customers see consistent and long-term reduction in bird numbers, which is where the benefit comes from, I guess.
Okay. Okay. And do you have a favorite species of bird? They always ask that when we started in bird control group. They said, "What's your favorite bird?"
Oh, no, I'd definitely say if I had a favorite species, it would be a peregrine falcon, just because of the speed that they attack and hunt. But we don't often use the lasers against them. So
no. Actually, that does bring to mind one question, and I don't know where I saw this. I guess it was someplace in airport installations. Bring up birds of prey onto the location to keep away flocks of other kinds of birds. Is that also a solution used in the UK at all?
yeah, so we've used handheld lasers alongside falconry with some of our other installation partners, where they have a bird of prey offering a predatory response from the target species. And then when those birds need to take a rest, we then flip and change that to using handheld lasers. So it allows the bird of prey to take some rest. We also have some other installation partners that have used birds of prey and trained them to follow the end of the laser dot, where at the end of it, they'll find at the bird that they want to hunt. That's not often what we use.
So you train
use the actual handheld laser. So they use the handheld laser
to
point the bird towards
in the direction, and it learns that.
Yeah, and it learns that you can train that bird to learn that they can avoid and ignore that laser dot. So birds of prey are the only species of bird. It's kind of a sector, but birds of prey are least affected by the laser system, which is good because we often don't want to deter predatory birds from the areas anyway. And then we can actually get them to work alongside the laser. So you've got nature working with technology to get an even better result as well.
Is that normally near airports, or where do they do that? What kind of locations?
We've used it in airports where they are protecting the runway against bird strikes. So places like Gatwick Airport, Luton Airport, Southampton, Heathrow, they all use handheld lasers. They often will also use bioacoustics, and then they'll also use predatory birds. So they use a combined approach where the lasers fit as part of that overall package. But we've also used lasers internally in sort of large open areas where physical methods of proofing are not really achievable or not practical. So they use handheld lasers inside rather than shooting the birds. They go and use a predatory bird. And then we also use falcons or egg and nest removal where it's permitted to do so alongside the laser to, again, achieve a higher result with the lasers more quickly than just using the laser itself.
Okay, very, very cool. So that's a good example of how nature can work together with technology.
Absolutely.
To solve a human problem, basically, but in a sustainable way. So that's great. Okay. Thank you very much, Sean. By the way, do you want the industry to think of a nickname for you? Should we try that?
What, Laser Sean?
The Laser Byrne.
Yeah, Laser Byrne. No, they just know IBM. So we're called Integrated Bird Management. Maybe IBM will be known as something different now. They'll see IBM as the bird guys instead.
You got a better logo. Are there supposed to be two birds like intertwined looking at me? Is that how it's supposed to be seen?
It's kind of, there's I don't know if you can see it, but it's a bird's head. I can't get out of the way of it. But it's a bird's head followed by like its tail, but all colored green as representing the color of the laser. So
and sustainability, that's always a thing.
And ecological method of bird control. Absolutely.
Very, very good. Thank you so much, Sean.
You're
I
welcome, LJ.
appreciate you taking the
Thank
time
you.
to speak with us today. And yeah, integrated bird management in the UK and Ireland. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.